Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Now, sorry to leave you in the dark on this one, tish. But we're going to be talking about how to add child objects and lights to your models in Blender. So in the last video, I showed you how to create all of the specular effects, the glass and the see-through objects. In this one today, I'm going to be showing you how to create objects that illuminate at night, illuminate 24/7, have a bit of glow to them, and also add a child object to a model. Trust me, it is relevant, a child object. It's the exact same process of making a object glow. And today we're going to talk about them things. So sit back and let's go on with the video. Okay, so welcome back to Blender. In the last video, we of course looked at creating the specular effects, the reflections off of these benches. We looked at creating the glass effects for this bus stop shelter. And we sort of had a look at how you'd create see-through textures in case you need to do something like this, where you've got a big block, but you want sort of specific bits showing and holes through the texture. So, moving on to this video, I shall be showing you how we create child objects and how we create lights. Now, there's two types of lights, and the child object will become apparent as we go through. The way of setting up a child object is very similar to how you set up a light, and as a result, I think it will only be appropriate to actually talk about that within this video. So, first off, with this model, there are two illuminated objects which I want to create. And you can see both of them here. The first of which is the adverts, which have disappeared because of the glass. Let me hide the glass. Let's do that, shall we? So yes, the first of which is these adverts. A lot of the time, if you come up to a bus stop, you'll obviously notice that there's lights behind the adverts, and the adverts will illuminate. So I'm going to have a go at creating the light effect behind them. These lights aren't actually going to have any sort of effect on the environment. It just sort of makes it look like they illuminate. To be honest, an advert doesn't produce a lot of sort of ambient light that glows off of anything, so I don't feel the need to add any lights. When you're adding lights and point lights and stuff, you want to try and keep them to as few as possible within the model. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a potentially very laggy game. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the lights to this this light here. I've already created the textures for you. I'm going to show you how you create an on and an off version of said texture in order to be able to have it turning on and off at night. And finally, the child object will be this this object here. So if I pull this away, you'll notice there's some objects. Realistically, I wouldn't create this as a child object. But for the purposes of demonstration, let's assume that your model is absolutely massive. You've got thousands upon thousands of faces, your objects are ridiculous, and you're basically running out of space. It might be necessary to create a child object. A child object will allow you to create a much larger model across 3 or 4 sort of separate models in order to produce one project, but not overload Blender or the export process or anything. So, as you come to sort of get used to them, I'm sure you'll work out exactly where child objects can be appropriate. They also allow you to more easily delete stuff from a certain model. So say this, for example, if I wanted to delete it, but I'd already created an exported version of it, I could use the child object and just delete the child reference. But for the purpose of this, I'm going to use this because it just seems we've not used this this object here, so I'm just going to use this one. So, setting up textures that glow. It's a very simple process. There's nothing to it. All you do is you click on the object you want to illuminate in the dark, and then you would just simply come down, create your materials normal, assign your texture as normal. I'm not going to show you all them because I've done that in the past. Come down into your IGS options. You might need to drop the menu down, and instead of the train basic object diffuse texture, shader, sorry, we're going to want the text shader. Now, the text shader basically means that the object you're looking at doesn't actually respond to light. So, say when you've got your sun shining down and certain objects have shadows appear on them, or as it gets dark, they get dark as well. The text shader will not change with the ambient light or any other kind of effects on it. It will just stay illuminated as bright as it can be, and that's pretty much what we want. One thing I don't do with illuminated textures is bake them. Because if you bake them, sometimes it can be hard to actually see the baking in action anyway, because it illuminates and it glows, and as a result it's hard to see what's going on there. But also it darkens down the images. Now if you want to darken down certain areas of the image, then go ahead, feel free, darken them all down, but you know, it's not necessary particularly. So basically, we've got our texture all set up. We've got our material. We've set the shader name to text. That's it. That's it. That's going to glow in game. We're going to do the exact same thing with this light up here. Come up, create your material, and let's get rid of the 001 from that material name. Create your material, assign your texture, go from add a text to text, and job done. That will now glow in game. The one thing to note, however, is currently in this state, your light will always be on. Your light will never go off. Same thing with the adverts. They'll be on all the time, and we don't really want that. The adverts, I don't mind if they're glowing all the time, because you often come to a bus stop and the lights will stay on 24/7. So I don't mind the adverts actually staying on all the time. The light, however, I do want it to turn off during the day. And you see, I have actually created two versions of the model. One is illuminated, and one is unilluminated. And if I hide the illuminated version, you'll see that it's similar sort of texture. What I've done is I've actually gone to a bus stop. I've taken a picture sort of from this angle of the light. I've then come back later in the day and taken a picture of the same light on, and then you can use it to create two objects. So basically, the way I would do this, I would grab my off object, create that, and then I would just maybe add 0.1 of a meter, so 10 centimeters that would be, to each face. So basically, your new on texture needs to be slightly larger than your off, and because it needs to overlap. When you have an off texture, it doesn't actually get replaced by the on texture. And if I quickly bring in the on texture, I'll click on a different object so it gets rid of the selection. You should see that the object that is illuminated is slightly larger, and you can see here, there you go, 5.1, 5.1, 5.4, or 5.4, whatever, 5.545. So it's slightly larger than the original off object, and that's just going to ensure that it's actually going to display. If you make it the exact same size, you'll see a lot of clipping and Z-tripping, and that's not what you want. So if I was to make this 5, 5, and 4, 5, theoretically, there you go, you can see it on the sides. It's not quite in the same side, but you see it's clipping in and out. That's what's going to happen in the game. So you want to make it slightly bigger. Finally, in order to get this to come on at night only, we just simply add underscore NIGHT. All lowercase, that's it. Underscore night to the end of an object. That means that the game will now know, there's no scripting required, the game will now know that this light is only to come on at night, and it will only display this object at night. So in the day, it'll look like this. In the night, it'll look like this. Currently, we won't have any glows on the object at the moment, but it will display correctly in the night and the day. So, the final part I want to talk about, there is more to setting up the lights, but I'll come back to that in a little while. We need to set up a child object for the light, but first off, let's talk about setting up a child object. Child objects, we're going to turn this into a child object. I've already created this into a separate model. Basically, I've just brought it into this, baked it within the same environment as my model, so it bakes correctly. I'll just simply copy it from here, paste it across into here. You'll see we've got an extra one now. I'll delete the extra one. Then we've got one. That's all we've got. That's all we need. Can delete it from this environment now. That's the wrong object to delete. And there we go. So, coming across to here, it's going to render like this as an object. So you'll only see these bits and everything else will be invisible, sort of thing. Or the back faces will be invisible. This is exactly what we want. Simply all we do now, we just check that everything's set up, check your materials set up as per normal. Where's the IGS? It moves about. It likes to move about the IGS, yep. Basic diffuse, we've got that. Our texture is assigned, and our IGS export is linked. All we do now, I'll jump across to my object. You'll see I've already created folders in preparation. Child. I'm going to copy this object into child. Paste that there. I'm also going to create a quick texture folder. And copy across the one texture I want, which is this one, including the ace because it's already been exported, into the wrong place, into the texture file, like so. Now I do copy this directory, grab my 2 in here, change the directory that this is linking to. Don't forget, if you were to not change the directory and then you were to delete this in here, it wouldn't recognize the fact that that this didn't exist. So if you were to do that, it would have an error. So make sure you always change the directory within Blender. What we can do from there, we can go back to our long child, export that into there. This is our folder, child.igs, export. There we go. I did have an issue with the export. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but it's all sorted. Okay. So now we'll jump back to this object quickly, re-delete that because I had to bring it back. We're going to export this. This is all ready to go. Quick note with the texturing of these lights. Like I say, I've unbaked it. However, I have baked the off version, and you'll see that they're part of the same. Object. In order to bake half a texture and not bake the other half, I basically separated them into 2 different objects. Baked it as a completely individual model like this, like this, leaving space for the other object to be added later, and then in my texture, you'll notice that the 2 bakes for this particular object are separate, and then I added from the illuminated one from my original later to create the effect of it being on. It just saves a bit of time. You could potentially just use a white plane in order to create the texture for your light if that's all you need. In which case you don't need to do any baking to it really at all. It's up to you how you need to set up your object, of course. Right, so bring that back in, bring the glass back in. Everything should be ready to export. I just need to make sure everything is indeed selected, which it isn't. There we go, now it is. Export, IGS, change that. There we go, all exported. Now, we jump into Blueprint Editor, and I'll show you how to assemble your object. So, come down, put in your name. We've already done this in the past. Put in your names in all of these. Render your component. Do that. That's all good. How do we get our child object into the game? Because if I export this at the moment, and we'll wait for the game to load, you will notice that where the child objects are, there's holes in the texture. Of course, we don't want that. We want our child objects there. You will also note, however, that the illuminated object should now function as intended. So if I change the time to night by clicking that, you'll see our light is now illuminated at night. Our adverts are glowing, but we can't actually see any glowing effects on or around our object. And I'll show you how to set them up in a second. First of all, in order to set up the child object, we come back to the child folder. The child folder can be anywhere. It doesn't matter where the child folder is, as long as it's somewhere and you can link it. So I'll drop down the child folder. I shall create a new item. We're just going to add a scenery blueprint. That's all it is to it. Scenery blueprint. And we'll name that child. Just for ease, I'll name all these child. Why not? When it's a child object, you'll most likely want to exclude from browser list. And we're just going to link our geometry ID here. And there you go, our geometry ID is linked. Oh, that's literally it. That's all we need. We can now export this. And once it exports into the environment, you'll notice that now only our child object is rendering. Like so. So in order to create one object out of both of these, we now need to jump back into our XML for our original object, drop down the container component, drop down children, add an element, drop down this, drop down that, blueprint ID set, and now we can type our child object into here. So in my case it's James class 37, the product being this first folder here. And the easiest way is to jump back to your child object, copy the directory you've pasted in there, paste it into there, and don't forget to reference the XML folder. I'll show you what happens. If I do the IGS file, it just fails. We want to reference the XML. The XML tells this XML we've got here exactly how we want to render the component. So basically, this is a product on its own. We're adding that object to this object. In theory. There you go. We're now linked up. We're all ready. And because we've built our object in the exact same place as where we actually want it to be, there's no more steps to actually aligning it up. Okay, so I quickly jump back into Blender. I moved the object up 1 meter, and now you can see when I add it to the main object, it's not forming in the right place. Now, if this happens and you've built your object in the wrong place, it's not the end of the world. There are 2 ways of doing it. You can either come back to your child reference within your main file, and you can change it around with this matrix. How the matrix work, I cannot get my head around it. The easiest way to actually move an object is to actually grab the object by clicking on it in here. You'll see we have our crosshair now up here. You can actually drag them around. And like so, we can sort of line it up, and eventually we'll have it in the correct place. Yeah, that looks decent. It's not quite in the right place. Like I say, the easiest way is to create a child object where you actually want it in relative to what your object is. But if you do need to create it in a different place, such as you're building a child object for a train that exists, you can move it around afterwards, and you've got for all the axis of movement, you can do all this. Control Z will take you back. There's no undo button in this test environment. However, once you've moved your object, if I export again, you'll notice it's still in the exact same place. It's in the exact same place as it was. Now, say I did that. Oh no, I've put it in the wrong place. Oh, I export it. Oh, it's still in the wrong place. What do I do here? Well, you could move it back. Alternatively, it's often easier just to simply... I'll copy the reference here so I don't have to type it all again. It's often simpler just to come back, delete it by right-clicking on child and pressing delete. Add a new object again. Set all that up. James class 37 and wagon route assets. Export it again, and that's back to where you started. You can start the movement all over again. It depends on obviously where you are. If you've built it in the correct place in the first place. So for example, I've moved that object. I shall now -1 for that, put it back in the correct place where it should be within Blender, export that, and once you export your child object again, I believe you need to re-export it using F8 in its own environment, and you'll notice, oh no, it's now in the wrong place again, it's down in the bottom. Again, what I'll simply do, I'll delete that, I'll put that there, bring it all back in, set it all back up, F8 export, simple, back where it needs to be, off we go, no troubles whatsoever. Like I say, realistically, I probably wouldn't make this little bit as a child object, not in a model like this, but if you've got a huge object, a child object will be useful to you. Finally, I think it's time I showed you how to add the lighting element to this lamp itself. Now, you may have noticed if you do a lot of route editing, Train Sim has something called point and spotlights. Point and spotlights add a glowing effect to an object. And the first thing we need to do is set up a spotlight. So, I've created a folder called Spotlight. There's nothing in it at the moment. If we go back to here, we want to copy this IGSX model file. That IGS export model file 2 or whatever it was called that I said you may need, it doesn't need it. You do not need it to export a model. So you can delete that if you want from the last video. Do that. Again, this will need its own set of textures. This will need a completely unique set. I already have a texture and a model set up. The modelling process for a point light and a spotlight is simple as anything. Okay, so I've opened my my model for my spotlight in Blender. It's a very simple model. It is literally a 0.1 by 0.1 by 0.1 cube attached to a 0.1 by 0.1 by 0.1 cone. And you need to make sure that it faces towards the positive y-axis so that the light appears to come out of it in the specific direction. For a point light, and I'll show you the difference between a point and a spotlight, you just need a 0.1 by 0.1 by 0.1 sphere. This object can be absolutely anything you want. It does not matter what it looks like. I just like to make mine nice and small so that you can still see what they're trying to achieve, but they don't become obnoxious like some of DTG's, because as far as Dovetail games are concerned, I think their spotlight objects are normally too big. You can't actually see the texture behind what you're looking at. So I like to make it nice and small so it's actually obvious what you're dealing with. Anywho, got my model prepared. I'll just simply go into IGS, reference the correct IGS. If we go back from child, spotlight, texture, already got my texture pre-prepared. You don't even need to change this other image down here. You only need the IGS. That's all that matters. Check that my thingy here is set up to the correct shader, which it now is. Check you've got your name correctly. Everything needs to be named up as if it was a model that you wanted to use. Materials and textures. But, of course, the game knows that you don't want this spotlight.igs. The game knows that you don't want this object visible within the working environment or within the game environment. So as soon as you click play, the child object for the light will disappear. You will not be able to see it. So that's our light setup. We come back to our spotlight folder. You'll see our spotlights here. How do we set up the spotlight? Well, we just go, we add that. We come down to a spotlight blueprint. And these are reasonably simple to set up as well. I'm just going to call it spotlight. Simple name. No, we know what it is. Again, same thing. Name everything up as you would normally. Again, it's a child object, so we're going to want exclude from browser list. Render component. Set up the directory. Again, I'm just going to grab this one as it's the same directory. Copy that. Delete the bits that are irrelevant. Spotlight. Amend the directory. /spotlight.igs. And get rid of the... There we go. That's all linked up. We know it's ready to go. This isn't really going to do a lot at the moment. We want to scroll down. We can close all these, or the render and the name. We're going to scroll down to the light component. This is where your light setup is all carried out. So, first of all, we're going to add some colour to the light. Now, I really love the way the RGB of Train Sim works. I think that's really strong. A strong sort of area of how Train Sim sets up its lighting. So, first of all, you want to set your alpha to full. I mean, you don't have to set your alpha to full, but this will make it as bright as possible within the colours you have, sort of thing. If you want a white, you've got a colour mix. And colour mixing to white is just simply created of red, green and blue. If you want to add sort of orange lights and stuff, you can colour mix down all your different RGB values. There you go, we have an orange light. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to have a white light. Maybe I'll give it a tiny hint of yellow, just so it's not quite perfectly white. You can see the texture on our object. It looks perfectly white, but it's not quite perfectly white. There is a tiny discrepancy in the coloration, so you can mess about with the colours to your heart's desire. That's the main thing on this. Day-night cycle. If you untick that, the light will be on 24/7 all the time. We don't want that for this particular model. We want our light to go off. If you've got a light that's going to stay on all day, say you're building something for an underground tunnel or something, you wanted a light in it, you'd untick this because you want your light on 24/7, regardless of whether it's day or night. We want it to come on only in the night. So day-night cycle, tick that, and it will come on only at night. I do not think it's possible to create a light that comes on only in the day, which it does make you think, why would you bother? But there are a couple of instances where I've sort of thought, yeah, I really wish I could create a light that comes on only during the day, and I don't think it's possible, so that's how it is. Radius, then. Radius is all dependent on how far the light's going to shine. Now, for this particular model, the light doesn't need to shine very far, so I'll probably leave it on 10 and we'll experiment with it. But if you make the number higher, it will add distance to how much far the light shines. I believe it works in meters, so if you want your light to travel 100 meters, just type 100 in, and that's simply how you'd set it up. Again, I'm going to leave it on 10 for now. Phi, or pi. Phi, I think it is. That's basically the outer radius of how much a spotlight casts its light to. Basically, a spotlight is created of a central core of light, which is the theta, and an outer sort of fade, which is the phi. So, if I extend my phi to 60, but I leave my theta as 30, you're going to get a central core of light at a radius of 30. Again, it might be 30 meters. I'm not exactly sure what these relate to. I'm pretty sure the radius is actually meters. Phi and theta, I don't know what they actually relate to. Somebody will probably tell me what they are. But basically, the bigger these numbers you go, the more light will be cast. I believe they may only go up to 99, and then they fail. You just get no light because it breaks and it doesn't really know how to calculate it. So as long as you stay anywhere between sort of 1 and, or even 0, I guess, for theta, and 99, you'll be alright. So if I increase that to 40, and then I increase phi to 60, you'll notice that the light, the central core of light where it's the most bright, where it's the brightest, will be at the theta radius, and then you'll have a bit of 20 meter or whatever it's measured in runoff where it fades out into nothingness on the phi. If I make this 10, you'll have a huge runoff. If I make it 60, you'll have 0 runoff. So that's how that works. I think I'm going to leave that back on 30 where it was, and maybe we'll try 60 with this. Again, we want to experiment with our light. See what works for us, see what doesn't. Now, I've set everything up. Just F8 export. Your light will appear on the ground. You won't see a lot from it at the moment. And you can make it day, and obviously you can see your model a bit better. You could make the model glow potentially in the dark. It doesn't really make much of a difference. If we lift it up a bit, you'll see it is actually casting a glow, and it's making a bit of light. We might want to possibly tone down the color a little bit. Maybe make that 0.7. Put a little, no, not 7, 0.7. You'll see that this color here is what your overall color will look like. Theoretically, should look slightly yellower now. Yep, you can see the color difference. It was pure white basically before. There's a slight hint of yellow in it now, and that's what we want because we want a regular sort of bulb. Right, setting up for this. It's the exact same way as you set up a child object. This is why a child object is relevant to lights. Drop that menu down. Drop that menu down. Set all that up. as they're in the same place, I can basically copy and paste from here. But you want to link up your all of your file directories. Again, get rid of that. Spotlight / spotlight.xml. Again, that tells you how it's rendering, and it tells you a bit more, because with the child objects we have, there's not much to it. But the XML will allow it to actually show as a light. If it was an XML for a standard scenery blueprint, then it wouldn't show a lot. But as this is a spotlight blueprint, which you can see up here, spotlight blueprint, it will actually display as a spotlight. So I can now jump back into my model. You see we've got our model here. I might make it day for this quickly. This is where the movement comes in. All I now do, again, you could theoretically use all of the matrix stuff and work out exactly where your light is going to be. I personally prefer to position them by hand because I can't get my head around the matrix. There are matrix calculators out there. If you want to go and have a look, feel free by all means. It's just not how I've never really understood it, so that's how it is, sort of thing. So I won't show you that. But we've positioned our light. Our light is actually emitting from the bottom of this. We might want to center this object so that it's actually at 0, and that will mean our light comes from, because the light always comes from X0, Y0, Z0. That's where it projects from. Irregardless of what your model looks like, it will always project from 0, 0, 0 in the positive Y direction, as far as Blender's concerned. Again, if you're using a different setup, if you're using a different modeling software, it may vary depending on sort of the direction it emits from. It might be X in your software. But when you come to set up the object in Blueprint Editor, that's how it will render. So now if I turn this off, turn it off. Yes, turn the sun off. Why don't I? You'll see that our bus stop is now illuminated. We have that light, and it's actually casting a shadow. Again, a day-night light. It's going to turn on at day. It's going to turn off at night, like so, like it should. Now, we can also add we can adjust that light now. Say so it looks a bit bright. I'll adjust it to 5 meters in distance. Export the model. Export the light even. Export the model again. There you go. That's a lot better. If I was to adjust, we'll say the theta and put it down to 40. Have a look at what it looks like now. I shall do that. Do that. The outer radius is a lot less than what it was before, and you can see the fade is not very far. If I change the theta to 10, do it again, you'll notice that the center of light is a lot less intense now, and there's a lot more fade to it. I will quickly show you with a point light. I'm not going to bother changing the model. Again, the model doesn't matter. You can use any model. But I'm just going to add a new object, new item. Come down until we find P for portal. That's not what we want. Point light. There we go. I'm just going to name it point light. Like with the other one. Again, we're going to use the exact same model. You can use the model as many times as you want, and you can create as many lights out of it that are all different. Point light. I'll just set all this up for you. Again, geometry ID is the spotlight because it's the same model. We've set up our color to the same position where we were before. Put that to 0.7 on the... No, not 7. We want 0. I'm sure I'd put 0. Whatever. And then alpha all the way to full. If you do the alpha on 0, I'll show you what happens when you do an alpha 0. Oh, okay. So this one's actually working. But sometimes when you do an alpha of 0, you'll actually get no light emitted from it. Normally, that's what seems to be what happens. But, you know, apparently it wants to work this time. But I'll set the alpha up anyway, and put it on 1. I would just put it on 1 as a standard precaution. 5. Set that up. Export that. And now all we do, I'll just change the name of this from Spotlight to Point Light. you can see how a point light works is very different to how a spotlight works. There's no phi, there's no theta in a spotlight. All you've got is a simple ball of light. So imagine there is a spherical ball around the object, which emits light. It's a lot simpler to set up a point light, to be honest. You've not got any of the pi or theta to think about. Again, if I reduce the distance, it's just simply going to make the radius of the light less intense. Some models it's good for. For this, for example, it might be a good thing. I might even lower this down a little bit, and we'll have a bit of light on the ceiling emitting. For this one, it might be better, but it all depends, because obviously with a ball of light, if you put an object over here, for example, that shouldn't be illuminated, or if you put something above, let's say, the object above will illuminate. Now, there is one way to stop that, and you can click Cast Shadows. The problem with casting shadows is, as pretty as they look, and you can see all the objects are actually casting shadows, like I say they would. Oop, let's do that. I'll increase the distance on the point light, and hopefully the shadow should become a bit more apparent. There you go. See, as pretty as these look, if you put them in en masse, you're going to find your game lags significantly. Well, just significantly. So it's not great. I mean, yeah, you won't get any light above the model, but your game is going to lag like anything. One on its own is fine. You're probably not going to see any performance hit with one. Once you get to more advanced lights, yeah, you're going to see some real issues with your game. So, in general, never use cast shadows. The only time I've ever really seen cast shadows used is for cab lights. A lot of AP, DTG, all them will use cast shadows for cab lights, because it just makes the cab look a little bit more ambient, and it's only one normally. So, but that's basically it for the tutorial, to be honest. I might actually leave that as a point light rather than a spotlight, because it looks better. I'll probably update the model later on. But anyway, I hope that has been insightful. I'm not going to add a point light to these adverts, because again, in real life, the adverts wouldn't produce much light. If it doesn't produce a lot of light, there's probably not any point adding a point light to it. Just have a glow, and you see it from a distance. You know, if we're coming along. Oh yeah, there's an advert there, and then there's a bus stop that illuminates. So yes, play around, see what you've got with your own models. Use how I've taught you to your advantage, and hopefully you'll get on with it. Let me know, because there are obviously a lot of other things I can talk about within this series. But please, I wanna hear what you want to find out about. Nothing to do with train creation at the moment, because I personally can't do that myself. So I can't help you with that, unfortunately, at the moment. I mean, modelling side of things, yeah, maybe I can give you a few pointers, but in general, no, I can't really sort of help you much out with that. Oh, I'll untick day-night cycle, and you'll see that, obviously, now the light illuminates in the daytime as well as the nighttime. But yeah, if there's anything specific you want to see from me, many things, I've got other tutorials which I can do, such as how lofts are created, animation, I can do that kind of thing. But in general, yeah, please let me know what you want to see within this tutorial series. Anyway, I think that just about does it. I hope you've learnt a lot from this series. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye!